Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. I'm Gavin Schall, and for the second time today, you guys are so lucky. I'm joined by Gibson Pyper, just flat out one of the better basketball minds in the country, a former consultant for the Dallas Mavericks, consultant for the Michigan Wolverines, to continue to discuss how the New York Knicks have fixed their defense, Tom Thibodeau's scheme in depth, and also some tricks he would suggest for the Knicks to spice up their offense, all that and more. Right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day. We are now available on all platforms, and that includes on YouTube. So if you haven't already, go check us out there. See our smiling faces, throw us a subscription, throw us a like, throw us a comment, all that good stuff. But who's talking to you? I am Gavin Schall, a play-by-play broadcaster. If you're watching on YouTube, it just occurred to me I forgot to put up my little graphic. There you go. Now you can see it. Gavin Schall. You can follow along on Twitter at Locked On Knicks. Your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. He is Alex Wolf, editor-in-chief of the Strickland, the greatest Knicks website out there, but he is not here right now. Instead, I am joined by Gibson Pyper, as I mentioned in the little teaser, the man behind Half Court Hoops on Twitter. So go throw him a follow at Half Court Hoops. If you missed our part one, I would say circle back and check that out. But he put out a fantastic video called "These Two Players Are the Key to the Knicks, winning streak." So certainly go check that on YouTube. But first, enjoy my chat with Gibson, where we continue to dive deep on the solutions the Knicks have found defensively, Tom Thibodeau's scheme, their ultimate ceiling defensively, and so much more right now on Locked On Knicks. And then Immanuel Quickley, I noted earlier. I mean, there are stats that paint him as one of the most impactful defenders in the NBA. I think he is absolutely elite off the ball. I mean, even last night, he just got 3 steals, just kind of off anticipating like where a pass was going to go and running it and doing his best Ed Reed impersonation and intercepting it. On the ball, obviously, he has some issues against bigger and stronger guys, even though he's put on some weight and he's put on some muscle. How does he fit into the mix? Because as Deuce and Grimes have made such an impact, those guys have been the bigger names, and it almost feels like IQ is maybe not getting the credit he deserves, and it feels like such a relevant conversation right now with the rumors that the Knicks might be willing to move off of him.
Yeah, he didn't stand out that much on film to me, if I'm just being honest. Like, yeah, when I watched the film, it wasn't like, oh man, like Quickley's doing like a lot of really good things. I think he's an average, completely fine defender, right? Like I don't think he does anything particularly great when I watched the film, at least. And for reference, I think I watched the last 12 games, so I haven't like studied every game this season. But when I watched, it was just like, okay, he's usually in the right position. You know, his active hands, he's pretty quick. But he didn't really do anything that would make me go like, man, he's one of the best guard defenders in the league. You know, like that kind of thing. Mainly because like if you had like a Drew Holiday on him, like Drew's just going to walk him down to the post, walk him down to the lane, and he just struggles in that scenario. But I will say, you know, like he's come up in a lot of these trade rumors and everything, which I think is insane to just like throw him in. Like he's a good young guard. Like I don't get that. I think he is a very good second unit core defender that should be a part of long-term plans. But I don't think he would necessarily is like an above average or a standout defender, in my opinion.
Yeah, I do think it feels weird to say this because obviously his numbers stood out even more when there weren't other good defenders really playing a whole lot for the Knicks. But I do think both offensively and defensively, there's a certain exponential effect to having him, Grimes, and Deuce together, just because of how communicative they are defensively. And I think right at the beginning of the video you were talking about old Tibbs teams, and you showed a clip of, I can't remember, it was either the Bulls or Celtics in transition, but just kind of calling out where everyone was supposed to go. And I remember I read, I think it was in the Knicks Film School newsletter, but an article like 2 days before where they had a clip of exactly that same thing happening with Quickley kind of directing Grimes and directing Deuce. And there is, I mean, it kind of gets to your point on Randle on both ends of the floor. There's something contagious about effort. And I think we're seeing that in spades right now. And one guy's yelling, like everyone wants to yell, everyone wants to call up the screen, everyone wants to jump up and be the one who makes the stop and be the hero. And And right now they have so much momentum because of it. So we kind of started on him. I think we can end on him in terms of individual guys. Julius Randle, obviously it's a lot of focus. It's a lot of effort, but you just see some possessions where it kind of clicks for you. Like, all right, when he's really engaged and it's a switch situation, he's borderline special as a defender. Like the job he did, not that it was for a sustained amount of time, but there were moments where he was guarding Luka Doncic in that Dallas game. I was like, and Luka was kind of like, all right, this guy's like as big, stronger than me, and pretty quick, and like not really biting on anything that I'm doing. And I think I'm sure maybe you had the same takeaway from watching a dozen games. Like you just wish it could happen from play to play, game to game. But what do you think is the key to his renewed consistency and his renewed positive effect on the Knicks defense?
Yeah, I mean, he was pretty awful at times. When I started, I was like, wow, like I couldn't believe some of the stuff that was happening. And like, you talk about being able to switch on to Luka and stuff. It's all just engagement for him. I mean, he's been in the league long enough. This is his third year under Tibbs.
Yeah.
So like he knows the system. He knows what to do. He knows where to be. He's got a good defensive instincts. He's got good length. And I think he's pretty quick, right now. And you would just watch him switch in like the Portland game and then just stand there. Like he would just stand there at the elbow, and his guy would he switch on to Nurkic, where's Nurkic going to go? Like he's not a pick and pop threat. Where's he going to go? He's going to go to the basket. He's going to try to post you up or just cut. So they switch. Simons drives and he just walks right behind Randle. They throw the ball in the post in the Suns game and they just walk behind. Craig just walks right behind Randle to the basket. I mean, it was just like, it was James Harden level of focus at times. Right. And that's not good at all. Like you can't be in the same conversation as the James Harden defense. Like it just is never good. And so, you watch that, you're like, if he just tried, like if he just gave half an effort, they would be completely fine in these scenarios. Just stay with your man. Like don't lose your man off the ball. It's that simple. And then you watch that, and then slowly he was getting better. Like the Mavericks game, he was getting better. Like you said, switch on a Luka, which was pretty impressive. But Luka's also not the quick twitch guy who's going to attack you, one-on-one and he's not John Morant, right? He's not going to, blow by you like that. Luka's methodical. He's going to take you down and try to get to his spots and use his length and his size. So that makes sense that he would switch onto a player kind of like Luka. But the problem arises with him where he tends to, because I think he thinks of himself as the offensive focal point, which we can get to, and he may or may not be, or should or shouldn't be, depending on who you're asking. And he's certainly had a fantastic stretch here these last 5-6 games. But because those guys tend to take more defensive possessions off because they're more focused on offense or have an offensive load, if you will. I think that's where he gets into trouble. Whereas if he thought of himself as a extremely above average player or a borderline all-star player, he could be one of the better two-way fours in the league, right? Like he could be a really good defensive player and a really good offensive player instead of being an elite offensive player and a really poor he's got to find the balance of those two. And that I think will take the Knicks to another level, which they are currently not at.
Yeah. And it was funny. Last night we were talking about, all right, 5-game winning streak. How sustainable is this? And we're like, if Julius just kind of keeps playing how he's playing, like it feels pretty realistic. And I guess that's how I want to wrap up this defensive conversation. How good do you think this team ultimately is on that end of the floor? They're all the way up to 12th. We noted it last 5 games, number 1 defense in the NBA. Do you think that tops out as like a top 8 defense, top 9? Do you think it evens out and they're closer to average? Like where does this all end up for the New York Knicks this season? All right, guys, we'll be back in just a sec to continue our conversation with Gibson. We're going to get into Tibbs's scheme. What are some of the weaknesses? What are the strengths and how is it being executed better? But first, Turo is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want, whenever you want it, from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. Book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip. Get a classic or luxury car for a special event, birthday, or holiday. Find affordable economy cars if you're on a budget and just need to get from A to B. Test drive the new electric vehicle you've had your eye on to see how it fits into your everyday life. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com.
Yeah, I think they'll continue to improve because there's still communication errors on the court from even just having Grimes and McBride, and just kind of the rotation changes, right? So you're going to have some communication issues and just some new players learning each other and things like that. Their starting lineup right now would rank as, I think, the 9th or 10th best defense in the NBA. And I think that's probably the highest point they could get, in my opinion. It's probably like a borderline top 10, maybe a top 8 and sneak in there. But I don't know, against the best teams, they haven't proven, at least to me, the best teams at their peak, that they could stop them. Like, can they stop the Bucks? Can they stop the 76ers? Can they stop the Celtics? And right now, I think the answer is no. I don't think they have a chance to stop them because of the lack of flexibility, right? So, like, if you play the Celtics right now, the best way to stop them is to switch everything and overhelp. That's like the number one way to stop their 5 out, because if you make Tatum and Brown stagnant isolation players, that they're not a good offense. Like, that's just what happens. And the Knicks right now cannot switch everything, and they cannot even switch 1 through 4 at times, because I don't think Randle has been as focused. But if they switch 1 through 4, they just walk Quickley or McBride or someone down the post. It just creates a lot of extra problems. And so when you look at the flexibility of, like, Joel Embiid, right? Like, he's a monster. Giannis, he's a monster. So it's like, you're looking at, the 1 through 4, 5 teams in the East. It's like, they had a good game against Cleveland, who shot probably the worst I've ever seen the Cavs shoot this season, which maybe that defensive system is predicated on overhelping and live with that variance. But I still think Cleveland, in especially in a playoff series, is a much harder matchup that the Knicks don't have a lot of answers for. So I think top 10, top 8 is like the peak. And I've kind of thought about it more and more. But at the end of the day, it's a Tibbs defense. He's a great coach. Those teams typically get better as the years go along. If they make a trade and they get, and the only way I would say trading Quickley would be advantageous is if they brought in a veteran presence, a couple of veteran pieces that are off the bench that are just going to be good rotation players on defense, right? Like the Warriors off the bench last year had 3 good players, Porter Jr., Bjelica, and Gary Payton II, who are all good rotation defensive players. Like Porter Jr. isn't a great defensive player, a great athlete. He just knows where to be. Like, he just knows, hey, I got to be in this position at this time. Don't screw up. And that sometimes is more important than having a youth or a potential player, maybe like Cam Reddish, where maybe he can improve into a defensive player, sure. But if you're trying, and if the franchise seems like it cares about making the playoffs and maybe winning a round, it makes maybe more important to have 2 or 3 veteran pieces off the bench who know how to make a defensive rotation, who are going to move the ball on offense and just be very solid versus flashing potential.
Yeah, I think in a way it's almost discouraging that Grimes and Deuce are clear-cut the 2 best defenders, because nominally they'd have the most room for improvement, right? You're talking about 2 guys who have played less than half an NBA season in terms of total games at this point. And you almost wonder how much better they can be, because there's already such a high level of savvy, of aggressiveness, of physicality, of good hands. Like how much can they improve? And the Knicks, I think what you were getting at is they're missing that destroyer defensively, right? I mean, you reference Giannis, Embiid, like the name Knicks fans have bandied about in a dream scenario, they could get OG Anunoby, and who knows with what's happening in Toronto. I doubt he's the guy that they would want to move off of, but I think finding that elite bigger wing. I mean, I know even in the past when we talked about Grimes, like people would say the only thing he's missing is he's 6'5" and not 6'8". And if he was 6'8", like he could be that type of guy. And maybe in next year's draft that is super deep, that has all these great wings, that'll be the spot the Knicks target and look to fix. But Gibson, before I let you go, I want to flip to the other side of the ball, because last night it initially looked like just another fantastic performance for the New York Knicks, with Julius Randle dropping 15 points in the first quarter, Jalen Brunson dropping 10 in the second quarter. They started off something like 15 to 27 from 3, and we're just bulldozing their way through the Bulls. Fourth quarter, it felt like a real regression to a lot of bad habits. And while this recent stretch has been a flashback in a good way to the Randle of 2 seasons ago, it turned into a flashback in a bad way where the offense became very stagnant. And there was a lot of like, all right, Julius, make something happen. And I think we got a pretty clear look in overtime. If you're going to be that simplistic, you're much better off having the ball in Jalen Brunson's hands, no matter how well Julius Randle is shooting it. But what have you made of the Knicks offense from a schematic perspective this year, where the most often criticism of Tibbs is that he's overly simplistic on that side of the ball? And what do you think they can continue to do to put the personnel in the best position to have success on offense?
Yeah, Tibbs offenses have always been simple. Like they just, if you're, typically speaking, if you're a very good defensive team, you're not going to be an extremely creative offensive team. You know, like you can only really focus on one side of the ball to be like elite at.
Can I ask, is that just because of practice time in the NBA, that not really being a thing?
Yeah. And also because teams this past 2 or 3 seasons have gone to switching more. I mean, switching almost everything at times. It may seem like you're more simplistic than you actually are, right? So the Knicks may run an action or two to start the possession, but if it gets switched, it's like, well, what do you rely on, right? You beat switches by creative sets, usually after timeouts, ball movement, player movement, which the Knicks aren't going to ever be good at just with the players they have right now, and basically one-on-one play. Like those are like the 3 common ways you attack switching. And so it's like, well, if teams are going to switch actions, you got to go to where you think your best avenue of attack is. And a lot of that is player decisions on the court. It's not necessarily tips, right? So like when you're playing in the flow, like you can call out plays and you can run actions, but at the end of the day, 24 seconds go by very quickly and the players have to make quick decisions and quick reactions, right? And so, it can get stagnant and Randle's game is kind of predicated on a little bit of that ISO stagnant. Let me get the ball, let me figure it out kind of thing. The problem to me with it isn't necessarily the ISO Randle or Jalen Brunson pick and roll. You can do whatever you want. And there's a lot of ways you can find ways to score on offense or not score in some cases. The problem is playing through Randle in particular with that stagnation, he isn't going to create. Like, especially this year, his assists to usage is way down compared to where it was, and his turnovers are up compared to where they were, compared to like the percentile rankings, right? So his assist to usage, he's in the 52nd percentile, turnover percentage in 26th percentile. So it's like you have a lot of usage for Randle, not a lot of playmaking and more turnovers than you want. So it's like, that's usually not a recipe if the shots aren't going in. It's going to be a failure right now. So to me, I would love to see them play more through Brunson at times. Just me personally, I think Brunson is the better overall decision maker. I think he can set up players more. I would like to see a little more side to side movement, like we talk about, maybe getting Julius Randle off a handoff from a guard on a second side action, and then maybe he can attack her. And if that fails, go into one-on-one play. So I would have to study it way more in depth, just off the top of my head right now, because I haven't focused as hardly on the offense as I had the defense. But I do think that, like, if Julius Randle made some of the shots last night, I don't know if we'd be having this conversation. So like if the shots go in, it's a different conversation.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap this one up with Gibson by talking about the New York Knicks offense and what Tom Thibodeau can do to be a little bit more creative on that side of the ball. But you already know what's coming up next. If you're watching on YouTube, it's betonline.net, your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball and World Cup. We've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. And if you want to start tonight, I'm taking the New York Knicks -4.5 over the Golden State Warriors. And it is a sure thing, because the Knicks over the last 10 games have been the second best team in basketball. Golden State without Steph Curry, not so much. So go make some money at BetOnline with me. Yeah, and I guess my only counter argument there is I just think Jalen Brunson is a better tough shot maker than Julius Randle. And he's honestly, from what I've seen, one of the best in the NBA at that. And I get the idea, like in an end of game situation, you want to go to the player with more size, like less of a chance of having their shot blocked. But he is just a wizard at finding little crevices and pumping and stepping through and hitting like a leaning 10-footer that really no one else on the team has any business taking, much less making. And he seems to hit them with regularity. And with Julius, to your point, it's just, I mean, that is his game, but it's just so methodical. And it's a lot of like, even when it's successful, it doesn't seem very repeatable, where he is triple teamed and he's just barely getting the ball out of his hands before it's knocked away out to Quentin Grimes, who hits a three off the front of the rim and then in. And you're like, all right, I guess that worked. I don't know if that's going to work every single time. So I just think that the speed of processing with Brunson and his ability to create space is just a little bit better. And then I guess the only other complaint I'd have in mind, and I don't know if this is something you've seen, I'm just watching the film on them, is, and this isn't, to be clear, like something I've noticed throughout the year, but against the Bulls, all the actions they were having with those two, inherently, I guess, because you're taking your two best players and running actions, like we're going against the Bulls' best defenders. And I was kind of wondering, like, all right, is there a world where you bring Grimes up to screen or Quickley up to screen and you try and get Randle on someone who isn't Alex Caruso and Brunson on someone who isn't Patrick Williams? Like, is that a possibility where they could get more offense?
Yeah, and it's all situational, right?
Yeah.
So like, if in a perfect world, yeah, it'd be nice to get the best defenders off your best players, but the goal of defense is to not let you do that. So it's like, the best teams and the best players like Luka would try to get somebody switched off of him and then go run another second action with another weaker defender, right? Whereas if you're running everything through Randle, let's say you run a Grimes pick and roll with Randle, right?
Yeah.
His defender's probably going to hedge, right? So he probably isn't going to switch that action. So are you taking more time trying to hunt the mismatch versus keeping the ball in the hands of your two best players? Or, like, where's that balance? I think personally, yeah, I would love to run maybe 2 or 3 actions beforehand, see how they guard it. If they switch that, then you get into the Randle Brunson ball screen action, sure. But it's also, you're taking, let's say Brunson passes the ball gets swung, and Randle and Brunson are on this side, and you're trying to get it back to them, they're denied, right? And then they got to work for the ball extra, and then there's 8 seconds left or 5 seconds left, and it's almost like panic mode versus keeping it in the hands of your two best players and allowing them to make reads and make plays, right? So that's like the balance of, now personally, I hate the throw the ball, ISO, and play, but it's the NBA, I understand it. I hate running. I would never run that in my offense. In high school, would never do that. It was super annoying. I would always make sure we got our best player, the best look off our best action, right? So whether that's a pin down or a handoff, ball screen, whatever they like to do, right? Like I coached Trey Murphy in high school. Empty side ball screen was his favorite action. We ran that every time we need a basket, right? Like I know we screen down for him, we get him the ball, we run an empty side ball screen action and let him go, right? But it wasn't like throw the ball at the elbow, hopefully you make a play. NBA guys are skilled enough and I understand the process behind it. I personally don't like it.
Yeah, and I think in Tibbs' defense, I would say I test wise, this is the most creativity he's put into the offense. I mean, even to your point on Randle, Randle run kind of like a ghost DHO or like QB keeper, whatever you want to call it, where he just fake the handoff, spun around and he got a wide open layup off it. And I think just when you see those moments, so you see they had like this kind of cool like double screen for Jericho Sims to get a lob, and you're like, and I get that that's not feasible every play because defenses catch up and a playbook is only so big and you only have so many times to make the call and your players only probably want to run stuff like that so many total times. But I think if they just continue to lean more in that direction and look, despite on paper, like you could go across the league and say, all right, how many teams does the Knicks have like their best offensive player versus the other team's best offensive player? And like whether it's Brunson or Randle, you probably put them in the bottom 5, 6, or 7. And despite that, they're 13th in the NBA in offense. So obviously something is going right there. And someone like RJ Barrett, who's starting to find a rhythm when he was just atrocious to start the season. I think I'm optimistic about the direction that it's headed overall. But Gibson, I've taken up a ton of your time. I really appreciate all of it. I know I feel like I've learned a lot. I'm sure everyone who listened feels like they've learned a ton. But before I let you go, can you tell everyone one more time where they can find all your work?
Yeah, for sure. So Half Court Hoops on Twitter and on YouTube. Those are my main kind of like updating where I put a lot of content. I have a membership website, the Basketball Playbook, where I basically build it for coaches, where if you want to learn more about, NBA concepts and things like that, I have 500 playbooks on there from everybody I've dissected over the past 10 seasons. And then I've also got a Learn Basketball course with Ben Falk from Clean the Glass, where if you want to learn kind of like what we're talking about, where I go more in depth and we talk about the advanced scheme, starting from very basics all the way to advanced. That's at learnbasketball.com. So basically every resources from free to paid, wherever people want to learn from is my goal.
Yeah, and I can say that, I mean, not just this Knicks video, the YouTube channel blowing up. I mean, I just saw it in a John Hollinger article the other day, so people are definitely appreciating the work. But Gibson, thanks so much for the time, and we'll talk to you all soon on Locked On Knicks.